Hi everyone, welcome back to another interview. I have the honor to introduce you to Dr. Mobasseri from Boston University today to discuss her work in sociology. So Dr. Mobasseri, could you please introduce yourself more?
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Sanaz Mobasseri. I am an assistant professor of management and organizations at Boston University, and I am a sociologist by training. I study race and gender inequality at work.
Mhm. So I know your research area is mainly focused on inequalities in workplaces. Are there any new topics that you've been researching recently, and would it be possible for you to share them with us?
Yeah, a lot of my energy lately has been devoted to thinking about new kinds of interventions, new changes that can be tested in companies to reduce differences that we wouldn't expect to see between men and women or between people of different ethnic or racial identities. Um, so that has been exciting because it's a shift away from just describing the nature of inequality or documenting differences and towards thinking about what might be effective for long-term sustainable change. So like an example is thinking about changes to people who are gatekeepers in senior positions, who are managers in organizations, and changes that we can make to their management orientation or leadership style, changes that
Wow, that's really
happen
interesting.
over a longer term too. So not just, sort of one-time changes, but things that we test over 6 months to a year to see if they have more durable effects on the nature of inequality.
Right. And has that kind of research, sorry, just kind of follow-up question, has that kind of research been done before, at least in this specific area?
Yeah, I think lots of people have been trying to do this research for a long time, and many have succeeded. I think in more recent years, companies have become more open to trying things out and experimenting, though there's a lot of legal concern around it. I think after George Floyd's death, there's been a shift in companies' willingness to address racial inequality in particular, although that seems to be sort of um, pulling back a little bit. I think the bigger challenge has been access to companies and sort of researchers being able to partner with organizations. That's also changed. In the time I've done my PhD till today, it's become much more routine.
Hmm. Wow, that's really interesting. Um, so next question, I know a lot of your papers study not only inequality, but specifically a bit of psychology and power dynamics. So I'm curious to what inspired you to direct your work in that direction.
I think that in a sense, I'm a very applied researcher. Like my ultimate aim is to just find one thing and document one thing that works at reducing inequality at work. And so as a result, it's really a multi-level phenomenon. You can't just think about it in terms of departments or teams or people, but you actually have to get inside the minds of people in order to be able to explain and understand that phenomenon. So for that reason, it's sort of unavoidable that you end up thinking about psychology. And power is, of course, fundamental to hierarchy and inequality.
Wow, that's a really good analysis. I also recently watched your presentation at the Harvard Race and Gender and Equity Symposium. What was that experience like?
It was actually very cool. I think it was cool because that's a symposium that has like a blended audience of scholars and practitioners, people who are all sort of interested, actively working or studying in this area. And it was more fun than just writing a paper and sort of sending it out over email to like the internet sphere of not engaging with a real person in the same way. It was cool to connect and to see if the ideas land and be able to answer questions and talk to people about what's in the paper. So it was actually really energizing, though I find it increasingly difficult to talk about such a complex and deeply historical phenomenon in a short amount of time. So that is I can't tell if I'm just getting more long-winded as I age or if I'm like really getting better at understanding what I'm studying, that it's taking me so much longer to talk about it.
So would you say that you prefer to, have multiple different presentations over like a length of time about a topic?
I I think it's a lot to ask because people are busy, but longer presentations are, of course, a better format for communicating more complex phenomenon.
Wow, that is really interesting. I guess it kind of answers my follow-up question to that. What are the differences between, other kinds of peer review and presentation? But is there anything else you think is different?
Mm, is there anything else? I think at peer review, you have the opportunity to get much deeper with a few people, often 2 to 4 sort of peer reviewers who are really reading your words closely and thinking about your ideas. And in a talk, you're hoping people catch the general gist of what you're saying or are connecting with a part of what you're saying. So it's a different kind of feedback. I think both are um, cool and exciting. Um, yeah, COVID made it slightly easier to give more presentations, but then sort of also at times decreased the payoff of presentations, made it harder to hear people, sort of react in the moment or raise their hand and say, wait, I don't get this, or do you mean this or that? So the connection was kind of lost. And not all
Hmm,
presentations
yeah.
are peer reviewed, they're just accepted or they're invited. So they don't all come with the same sort of detailed feedback you can expect from peer review.
Oh, thank you for the clarification on that. Another follow-up to that, as a researcher, do you often get to present your work in a symposium like this?
No, not often. It's not really something that universities necessarily incentivize researchers to do. And we don't make the most interesting presenters. I think I'd much rather have someone who writes for the popular press or an entertainer, command my attention for an hour than a researcher could be a bit dry. So when we do, it's exciting.
Yeah, and it certainly is so important to have, researchers do these kind of things, right?
Yes, yes. I think it is increasingly important to put out different ways of thinking about things critically and analyzing information. And I do think that as our attention spans get shorter and we, sort of are on social media or on TikTok or Instagram watching short sound bites, we do lose a bit of the like the other models that used to be out there for how to make arguments or parse information that researchers can offer.
Right, of course. So let's talk a bit more about your personal experience. What is it like to be teaching at Boston University?
It's hard and it is exciting. I think it's a tough time to be. I've been teaching pre and post the pandemic, and so I think that made it a bit challenging. It was certainly a tough time to be a college student when everybody was nervous about getting sick and you weren't sure what was going to happen or if your classmates were in the classroom or not. Um, it is exciting to be on the East Coast in an environment that's really college student heavy, where a lot of people are interested in learning and in the mind, sort of the mode of taking classes. So I think that part is fun. It's like swimming in a bigger ocean. I grew up in a college town um, where there was just one university in the area. So it wasn't, you know, as academic as the water is in Boston.
Oh, okay. And you said that it's different to be teaching on the East Coast. Does that mean you've been teaching in a different area before?
Yeah, well, I did my PhD on the West Coast, which was a different environment. Much less the norm for people. I mean, certainly the norm for people to go to graduate school and to do research, but not necessarily the norm to do it in an academic context. I think the East Coast and Boston in particular is some call it academic Mecca, so it's cool to be here.
That's really nice to hear. Um, and a little bit more about, your work. So what do you hope to, oh, sorry, what do you hope that people and companies can take away from all your publications?
Well, I hope they read them because I spend a lot of time working on them. I hope that my work pushes people to think beyond um, sort of the easy solutions to connecting people or creating more equitable workplaces that are less dehumanizing and that promote equality. I hope that um, my work pushes people to think broader about the phenomenon than just what's happening right in front of them, but also the context, what's happening in society, and what's happening in all parts of their organization. And that it pushes people to consider a range of new things as evidence. So a lot of people just think about, survey scores or compensation, sort of certain kinds of indicators as evidence of equality or inequality. And I hope that my work pushes people to think about people's feelings, how they communicate, who they communicate with, all of that as evidence about the culture of the organizations that they are building and inhabiting.
Right. And ultimately, the goal of research is to find more ways to provide the right information, right? You want to show them what the bigger picture is like.
Yeah, exactly. In a way that doesn't bore them in the process.
Right. Of course. And that kind of leads us to our last question. If you can give any kind of advice to a high school student from the perspective of a professor and researcher, what would you say?
Um, I often caution people not to give advice because it usually isn't relevant for anyone but yourself. I guess I would say I didn't have a lot of models of what research meant. I sort of thought it was boring. I don't remember it being taught in a very interesting way when I was in high school. I think I thought like science, chemistry lab, and hypothesis testing was like what science was. Um, it's been so enriching to my life and my personal development to be able to go to graduate school. And even if, that's not a leap that most people want to take because it's a major commitment of time. And I do think that there's a lot about the principles of research that are exciting and can be accessed even in high school. Like research methods or thinking critically or thinking broadly. Like you may be interested in only business, but may find that taking a class on music composition really changes how you think critically about, a certain aspect of business. So my advice would be to broaden and to open your mind up to different models of what research could be in case you have just the slightest inkling that it might be a career path that you want to pursue.
Wow, that's wonderful advice. And that wraps up our entire interview. Thank you so much for all those that have watched this entire video, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you.